Hey guys, Matt, IronTrap Garage, working on the 34 Ford project again. You guys may remember one of the things I keep mentioning that we were missing for the car was the steering column drop and the steering column tube. I've been looking around for that. The family's been looking for it. We haven't come up with it, and we're basically at the point now where I really need to get the steering column drop all hooked up and make sure it works before we start making the dash all pretty and painted up and clean. So I decided to be a little more resourceful since we are on this whole lockdown business. I've had to look around, and it's a little more of a pain to get material. Like, I'd have to order something from MSC or one of those places, hope they have it in stock, hope that they're shipping, and then wait for it. So I started digging around on my parts shelf, and I found the steering box from the 39 Deluxe parts car that we bought with the forgotten hot rod. I pulled the steering box out of that car when we parted it out and kept it because it had a good tube, a good drop, and I didn't know if I was going to need it on this car. I ended up not needing it. So what I did was, before we started this video, I spent about an hour extracting this tube and getting the column drop off. And the reason I picked this is because, number one, it has a nice little like factory flare to it that will fit up really nice in the back of the hub for that 3-spoke wheel. Number two, it's longer than a 34 Ford steering column tube. So what's nice about that is I can adjust this thing, get it to sit where I want, chop off the excess at the bottom, put a little relief cut for where the clamp goes, and we will have something after I clean it up and paint it that will look factory, which is nice. So this is kind of like the path of least resistance. You guys hear me talk about that a lot. We could totally overdo this, and I could have made some fancy stainless one and gone overboard, but in the end of the day, all this car really needs is just a satin black steering tube. So quick little update on this. We're going to work on making the steering column tube, and hopefully by the end of this video we will have a drop and steering column tube all attached to the dash, and yeah, that'll be it. Alright, so let's take the steering wheel off, number one. Just got it like thrown on there. And steering column tube, diameter and everything's there. It already still has the bearing in it, which is nice. Or whatever you want to call it. I don't know if this has got a bearing or might just have a sleeve in it, actually. Some of the F1 columns, they actually have a bearing in them. So we can test this. Let's just see how much longer it is. I know it's longer, but I don't know how much. So just gotta fish this through here. There we go. Alright, that's basically down. So holy crap, that's way longer. That's gotta be, man, 8-10 inches longer than what we need here. So what I'm going to do is take a measurement from the base of the steering box where the column tube ends, and basically where I want the steering column tube to end, and that should basically tell me what I need it to be for length, and then we can just adjust it a little bit from there. But we are way long. I just wanted to show for reference how much different it is. So now I gotta get this thing off. Whew. Alright, so I got the column tube mounted up, fits good there. Put a little relief cut you guys saw just so you could slip it over. And the column's fitting in. The little, you can't see it, but on the other side, the little cutout is matching up with the spot on the steering column where the lock would go. So that's all good, kind of just locked right in place. But what we're seeing here is there's a little bit of a gap there. Which isn't good, obviously. Well, it doesn't look good. But what's happening is, you can see I don't even have this through. I didn't hammer it down on the keyway yet, but the actual steering column itself should come up through there, obviously, so we can put a nut on it. So what's happening is And I'm not sure what they did originally when Barry had the car on the road, but what's happening is there's a bushing that's inside here that's hard to see. There's like a rubber bushing with like a Bakelite type insert that's basically the bushing that this would ride on, but it's got a bunch of slop in it. It's hard to show here, but there's a little bit of slop in it. So number one, it's bottoming out right here on that bushing. So on top of that, and also it being a little sloppy, I think what I'm going to do is extract that bushing and machine up quick one of my own oil impregnated bushings. I got a little bit of that I use on pretty much all my cars to use for like a bearing type material. So we'll knock that out, and then we can machine that so we can tap it down as far as we need it to go, so that this the steering wheel here basically will marry up and sit, you know, back, so it's like almost touching that bell, something like that. So that should be pretty cool. But so we'll get this off, knock that bushing out, and then I'll quick machine something up on the lathe, and we should be ready to rock and roll and mount the steering wheel finally. Alright, so if you guys ever heard me talk about like future matte and current matte, or nowadays matte, future or past matte, I was thinking of future matte, and I went on my shelf to look for some of this this bushing material. So it's basically a oil impregnated bronze that works really well for bushings and bearings type surfaces. Apparently I already made one because this one's already turned down, and it basically fits in the sleeve here. Pretty tight, has a tiny bit of slop in it, but basically what I usually do is run a little grub screw, 2 of them on either side here, into the bushing, and that locks it in place. Makes it easy to remove it then when you need it to. And I already bored out the center to match the steering column. I checked it, and so yeah, I didn't remember making this. Probably the last time when I made the one for the T, I made 2 of them, or I made it like extra long so I could have a second one. So great news for me, I already got a bushing. That saves me a lot of time. But just imagine me on the lathe, like machining it, and chips flying, everything's great. But yeah, that saved me like a bunch of work. So I'm gonna drop this in here, countersink, and figure out where this needs to sit. All right, so I got our bushing installed here. As you can see, it sits a little deeper than the one we put in. And you can see I have these little, trying to get it to focus here, these little set screws that are set in, and they're just above the surface basically, so they thread into that bushing, and then a little bit sticks out, and basically all that does is just keep the bushing from sliding back and forth and floating around in there too much. So they're just a precautionary thing. It's tapped in there and good. And I slid on, I got this column drop from a gentleman on the Ham that watches the channel, and hit me up, and we were just chatting and mentioned he had a gutted 3334 column drop. So he was nice enough to send that out to me, and I'm gonna just basically plug the holes for the switches, because we were using that one on the dash. And this is kind of just the quickest way to get this thing all mounted up without having to do something extravagant. So I'll just plug those holes up, no big deal. Maybe down the line further I'll weld them up and make them look nicer, but honestly just 2 little black plugs on either side should be fine. So now that I got this mounted up, I just have it loose, didn't tighten the pinch bolt down yet. We should be good to mount this up here, and then we can, once we're sure that this mounts up good, then we can, we're ready to paint it. All right, so for like the 19th time, we're gonna test fit this. It's good when the stuff has a tight fit there. So spin our column around the match. It looks like we're pretty good here. Now the dash is going to pull in, of course. Column pulls up like that. That center is about right there, and that looks pretty good. Let's just test this way. I took the keyway out just to make my life easier because it's got to get pressed on, obviously. So it slides on like that, pull up like that. That looks pretty good. It's just a little tiny gap behind the wheel, but I can actually cheat this sleeve up a little bit, I think, and it will take up a little bit of that gap there without hitting our bolts there. But either way, that's pretty good. Column drop lines up nicely. Wheel fits pretty good. Boom. Enough threads out there. As we tighten it down, it'll pull it on real good. So I'm happy with that. So yeah, so there we go. So that's the steering column drop and tube situation all taken care of. Now that I got this all mounted up, I'm happy with it. I know everything will line up and work well. We could basically, I'm going to take these set screws and actually Loctite them in. Use some Loctite, get those so that they won't move and they're set in place. And we could start sanding the column drop, and the column drop's already sanded nicely, but the column, get it all sanded and cleaned up and all the rust off of it. Then we could prime it, paint it. I'm just going to do like a satin black, I think, on it. Haven't decided yet, but I think I'm going to do a satin black on it. Yes, that should be pretty good. So another small little checklist item off our list here, and we're moving a little closer. So I'm going to work on getting the dash now all sanded and cleaned up, and get that painted for the next update on this. But this is just a quick little bonus thing like we were talking about, where oftentimes I skip over this and we don't show what we do and it just happens. So we thought we'd throw some of these in. So thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoy. Catch you later.